I'm so glad that Amy mentioned the Zoom whiteboard, which might be something we might share a familiarity with. But before we do that, let's just like acknowledge that this is a lot of content, right? So just give some virtual high fives to the people on the side, like your Brady Bunch people down there. Just give them a little like cheerleading dance move, like elbow up, you know, with your peeps. Hollywood Squares style. I'm in dance, so like these tools don't usually work for me, and I'm really trying to make them work. So one thing that worked so well last time that I got myself in trouble and have to do this presentation because I used the word digital intimacy was happened to me using the Zoom whiteboard with a class, a grad student class that I'm teaching up at Wesleyan right now. So I'm going to share my screen with all of you, and I'll just, there's a little out of order for me. I'm going to get one of these whiteboards up. You all see a whiteboard now as a shared screen move? Anybody having trouble? We're going to go back to Melissa's annotation tool. So if you remember how that works, to go to hover and look for the word annotate. So you get that little toolbar that's on the top. One thing I've taken to doing to check in with students is we create what we call a mood board. And it's just literally about clicking the text box and clicking any tool you like and starting to draw or write a sentence or stamp whatever you want onto the shared graffiti board here. So does everyone have their annotation tool up? And you could click to the text box and you could write something. I'm tired. You could write, you know, a bunch of Z's on the board. I'm not seeing anyone do it yet, so I'm thinking I should pause.
Sarah, it's on my end, it's saying you've started screen sharing, but I can't see the board.
Oh, here we go. Somehow it paused. Bring your window to the front. Oh, is this what I need to do?
There we go.
Oh, brilliant.
Awesome.
I have a million screens up and I didn't realize. #learning. Okay, so if you remember that you can use the text function and say, basically this is current mood 101. And we put that up there. Anytime, anyone, you will not be identified in your mood, but you can just write anything you want, or you can go to the draw annotation, which is right next to text. And you can pick one of those squiggly lines, and you can pick the color by clicking on the format tab, and you can start to just like totally do whatever it is you feel like doing, and no one's gonna judge your artwork. If someone says something that you love, you can put hearts around it. I'm not gonna erase anything unless someone does something really inappropriate. But basically we create a graffiti board as a check-in as the class doorbells are ringing and people are coming in. So it's not even anything, it's just kindergarten art. But it's a different way to be in the space together. It's a different way to visually relate, and kind of like what Rebecca was talking about with people liking each other's posts. You can add to what someone else is saying. You can kind of get groovy with like the rhythm of what this looks like. You can save it, go on to your business, come back to this at the end. We can open up a new page, start a mood board there, like now what's our current mood around this stuff. And it is really exploratory. It is not evaluative. It does not show up on my syllabus. Like we don't get graded for this. But it's just another way to be. So I'm basically had a kind of a breakthrough with some grads on this, and they were talking about how many artists are out of work right now, and I teach a lot about labor and economics, and everybody was burnt out. So I wrote, where do we go from here? Current mood. And we just had this big explosion of ideas. So this is a tiny thing, but since you're all on Zoom anyway, I figured, this is what's going on. And I don't want to kill your artistic impulses now. It's like, I'm going to kill your dreams by moving on. But we can come back to this. This might be good at the end, David, like after we could check the mood at the end of the workshop at the end. So will it kill you if I stop sharing this? I have actual other content to share. So hold on to your dreams. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna share an actual PowerPoint I made for this thing around this term that I guess I started calling it digital intimacy. So here we go. Can you see that screen that says digital intimacy now? Is that everybody okay seeing that? Okay, great. So while we're doing this, I'll ask you to pull up a tab on your Safari or whatever engine you use. There's a website related to this software I'm using called Menti, MENTI.com. And I can throw that in the chat. if you just log on to that, it's going to be useful in an activity that we're going to do in 1 second. So how do you cultivate, belonging when we're in this weird mediated space? That's basically what I'm here to share with you some strategies about. And I think it's important we define what the heck digital intimacy might even be. Spoiler alert, we're not going to talk about how the coronavirus is changing online dating or any of the other kinds of ways we could talk about intimacy. That's for another class. It's not a class that I'm qualified to teach. So I am happy to talk to you today about this other idea, intimacy strategies in the tools you're already using, so your syllabi or Sakai. And then there's this tool I'm using here called Mentimeter, which I'm not going to give you a big commercial for, but what it does, I think, could also be done with other programs. So I'm going to try and get through all this with you here. I'm mostly interested in how the technology we're getting habituated to use for distance learning can be retooled in different ways to create emotional connections that often emerge, but not always, in classroom learning, right? So I'm a dance person and I'm pretty invested in nonverbal communication and nonverbal cues. So you don't get those as easily with this thing that we're using, this technology that we're using here. So I'm trying to figure out how to be quietly personal with my students when I'm in seminar, and try to find a way to resuscitate some new things that campus life and live classroom culture can kind of teach us about how to be in community with each other. So the first idea is just in your syllabus, right? It's your class contract. And I'm just doing this with both my courses this semester, explicitly acknowledging our shared humanity under these conditions in writing in my syllabus. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. In my syllabus, after course objectives, I say course principles, living in a global pandemic, course principles. I say nobody signed up for this, not for the sickness, not for the physical distancing, not for the sudden end of our collective lives together, not for an online class, not for teaching or learning remotely, not for learning from home, master new technologies, just saying acknowledging this is where we are. Also saying the humane option is always the best option. We're going to prioritize supporting each other as humans. So we got to humanize things. If we can't feel the pulse of the room because we're not in real time, how else do we take care of each other? We're going to prioritize simple solutions that make sense for the most. And I'm happy to share all this text if this mantra is useful to you. And also prioritize sharing resources and clearly communicating. So I'm actually trying to be clear here and saying things like, we cannot just do the same thing online that I planned for my service learning course. So here's what I've planned and help me solve these problems because this is still service that is needed and this is still work that we all want to do. So some assignments are no longer possible, some expectations are no longer reasonable, some objectives are just no longer valuable, right? So going ahead and just being human inside of this space. We foster intellectual nourishment, social connection, personal accommodation, really stressing accommodation and constant communication about what people need. I talk really fast. You might realize that now. I get that feedback a lot that I need to dial it way back, but really saying there is zero penalty for this. In fact, we need more of this communication because of the distance, right? And although I'm doing synchronous online classes, obviously asynchronous content is available, but to encourage those who can come synchronously to learn together to combat isolation, right? So just acknowledging the isolation that's going on. This is all just syllabus stuff, but remaining flexible, adjusting to the situation, which sounds like, nobody knows where this is going and we'll need to keep adapting. So just putting that in the syllabus as kind of a bill of rights. And this all came from Professor Brandon Bain. I kind of adapted it. He's at UC Irvine. So that's a thing that I think, might go without saying, but that was just a simple analog step. Now, for those of you who are on Sakai, I've got a lot of reflections hardwired. Student reflection is hardwired into the course. I don't know if I'm doing this right. Maybe Amy can help me, but the blog feature on Sakai is going to be my go-to in my 50-person lecture class, because what I want to do with ongoing student reflections is let them have an archive from day 1 to the end of week 14, where under one roof they can keep all of their ideas. And then when we break out into small groups, they can search for each other alphabetically and go ahead and find each other's blogs and be in dialogue there, and also archive comments from friends and from team members on certain parts of the project. So I'm doing this for the first time, but as a space to build weekly reflections and then archive them, I thought this would be a straightforward part of Sakai to take advantage of. Not a lot of people use it according to the OIT folks, but I'm going to test it out this time. I'm asking students to also state their principles for learning in a global pandemic as their first blog post. So once we build a blog, we get them to answer the same questions that I think are circling around a lot of us who are planning class syllabi right now. Okay, so I'm going really fast. Just to be meta for a minute, the actual PowerPoint program, the app that I'm using is called Mentimeter.com, and it's, as you can see, it's very visual. There's a lot more visual flexibility to it, and I'm gonna kind of fast forward past what this is, but we can zoom back to it. I wanna, this is totally a commercial for it, so I'm gonna actually just blop all these bloppers on here. It costs money. I use my research startup. It cost me $179 for the year to have this. And why I chose it is that I think PowerPoints are pretty boring, and I wanted to use some of the built-in functionality for polling and class discussion that I'm going to share with you now. But the thing I promise is that I think some of these items could be adapted to regular Zoom activity, even with the annotation stuff that we learned from Melissa earlier. So I'm going to go meta for a moment and just show you that that's what we're doing. So one thing that we can do on Mentimeter that I kind of love is create a collective word cloud. Do you all know what a word cloud is? You know, you can take like a piece of writing, and there are search engines, and you dump all the writing into a database, and it pulls forward a cloud that shows you how often you use certain words. So right now, we're gonna do a hive mind word cloud. And if you can bring up a separate tab, and oh my gosh, people are doing it, they know where I'm going. And you just basically, pull up menti.com. There's a course code at the top. You can see it, it's 16390. You type that in, you don't have to have any other like login. You answer the prompt, and you can use up to 3 words. And kind of like Nearpod, all these students need is to be able to open a tab, pull up menti.com, and suddenly participate. The question, the prompt is up to 3 words. What aspects of digitally mediated teaching or learning frustrate you the most? And once you type it in, they give you 3 places to do that. You hit send, and they'll start to populate here. And maybe we don't share the same ideas, but it's a way to, with a group of 50 people, start to source commonalities, source divergences, and actually ask for clarifying, comments with some of the things that get plopped up here, So we're kind of doing it now, and I know we've been doing a lot of this, so I'll let it keep populating as I talk. But I think the word clouds can be done with really topical types of things. I've been in a couple of courses where they're used to do land acknowledgements. So what I mean by that is they'll have all the students go to native.ca, which is like a mapping software where you can put your zip code in and you can learn what indigenous land your home zip code is occupying. And all the students put the First Nations that they get as a result into the cloud, and we do a collective digital land acknowledgement that says that we are here today indebted to the keepers and stewards of all of this land. So the digital doesn't allow us to kind of have that same sense of place, but I've seen this tool be used in really beautiful ways to connect people to a shared humanity way bigger than Duke, right? So it's kind of a cool function. I don't know, maybe we're getting burnt out on this, but I want to show you a bunch of other things. So maybe I should just say thank you. So we have here, just to read back, that people seem to want more physical interaction. That's one of the things we're losing. Reading students, reactions, their actual live reactions. I definitely feel that that's one of the trade-offs here. And the Zoom fatigue, the draining type of fatigue with this. So these types of slides are actually readily available on the Mentimeter. I actually thought, oh, we already did this. Sorry. So the mood board, I was going to do that here, but we did at the beginning because we were already on Zoom. But just actually to back up, it'll save your word cloud if you go back and forth with it like this, and you can keep adding to it. So just to say, I guess that's maybe enough to say about this. Sorry, I'm not keeping track. I've been thinking of Zoom intimacy hacks because I don't think Zoom is offering any webinars on this. So I feel a little like I'm hacking in. When when Melissa offered this idea of renaming, I think it's like super fun to allow days where you can rename yourself like whatever you want during the class. And you can change it during the class. So like, for example, I'm gonna do one. You know, you could suddenly, digital intimacy czar, Sarah Wilbur is leading the class. And if you allow renaming, or if you acknowledge that we should rename at any time in the class, people just change persona the entire time we're having discussion. You have Mickey Mouse, you have Pat Sajak, you have these things. This might be more my speed because I tend to teach like this all the time, but renaming is really fun. Another hack, I did the earlier one, whoops, the Hollywood Squares high fives. Figuring out how to dance in the box is a big challenge, but I often do that and people feel really nerdy, but I think they do it out of just like the desire to connect. I also do a lot of small dances and victory dances. During breaks, I'll play music and I'll let them go on 5 minutes, but I kind of make them for the first, 10 seconds, do a very small victory dance that we made it through what we just got through, and then they get to go on their break and they can turn off their screen. Of course, for privacy purposes, this would presume that everyone's comfortable in that moment sharing their screen. This is a joke, but when we were coming into this meeting today, we were talking about intimacy and testing our Zooms with Kimmy, and I realized like part of the intimacy thing for me is that I'm in my house right now talking to you, and sometimes I'm in my bedroom talking to students, and also I'm in my house talking to people across in another country in a time zone. So it's this simultaneous local and global thing that kind of blows my mind sometimes. So I wondered out loud, what would happen instead of a webinar if we had a pajamanar? That just means that instead of casual Friday, people just acknowledge that they're in their house, and then you get to wear your pajamas that day. I don't know. I mean, that might be the dumbest thing you've heard all week. It's Friday, Sarah should stop telling jokes. But I do kind of feel like to build in intimacy or just remind everyone that you don't have to do the business as usual could be a fun byproduct. I work in the arts, so, In any event, the takeaways from this, thank you for listening. I think that the analog form of the syllabus is still a great contract to practice different kinds of intimacy and humanization. The Sakai tools, even these kinds of blogs and things could be touch points. And then there's these interactive programs for those who want to invest to sort of track who's out there. And I like the word cloud because it kind of helps remind everyone that we're building something when we come together. And so building something, maybe I'll leave it at that. I'm gonna stop talking now. I'll stop sharing too.
Thanks, Sarah. Digital Intimacy Czar. Sorry, you were renamed. So we have some great questions in the chat box that I'm just going to go through briefly so that then we can do some introductions. But thanks for the awesome ending to the presentations. So let me see. So Katie Hyde was asking, and I believe Amy's answered this, is there a way to do this mood board, etc., in small groups using breakout rooms? And Amy was saying, yes, you can share the Zoom whiteboard in the breakout rooms and annotate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super fun. And it's hard. My students, when we do it that way, we're always nervous about losing the whiteboards once they're done. So they usually just take a screenshot of it and they hang on to it, and they're like little keepsakes and things. And you get better at annotating and drawing if you do that more. So it's kind of fun.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah and Amy. All right. Susie asked, is the Sakai blog different from using a normal blog? If so, what is the advantage?
I haven't used like a WordPress or anything, but I know you can do that through Sakai as well. I would imagine it's less functionality than WordPress. On Sakai, it's probably mostly text, but I think you can actually record on WarpWire video posts, and you can pull them over. And you can also do that in Sakai with the discussion forums function. I've recently learned you can, if you know what the WarpWire function is, it's like a video recording software. I feel sometimes like text is it's overdetermined on Sakai as it is. So rather than have them write a discussion post, I have them tape a response. And they can also do a podcast if they don't want to be seen. So a podcast just means you get a sticky note and you put it in front of your camera and you are suddenly podcasting your thing. So, so that could happen on WarpWire in lieu of writing, just as another modality. But I don't know, maybe Amy has an idea about the blog difference. It's my first time using it, so.
Yeah. I was going to recommend, I don't know for sure myself, but I know my colleagues probably would. So if any of you want to go through the differences between this one and that one, you could drop into DLI open office hours 1 to 3 every day of the week. And I can post the URL here. Not trying to give us a plug, but that's where you can get into detail on certain things.
Thanks, Amy.
I've used the blog in Sakai before, and the main draw is that it's within Sakai, so they're not having to go to another tool. And the downside is that it's very bland. Like this, visually, it's not pleasing.
Thanks, Joan. Oh, sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to mention I've used WordPress for blogs, well, for discussion boards, really. And they certainly look a lot better. It feels like more like writing in a real world context, but they're extremely cumbersome to set up.
Thanks, Melissa. Let's see. Another question, Sarah, was, is Mentimeter different from Poll Everywhere?
It is different. Yeah, it's totally a different website. I realized I was going to show you the guts of how it works, but maybe I can just screenshot some of this. And I can give you this PowerPoint, Kimmy, to share out because there's a lot of text on it.
Awesome.
It has a lot of designed multiple choice, word cloud, open-ended questions, scales, ranking, Q&A. These are all separate slides you just pull right in, and you can just you don't have to build anything. It's pretty user-friendly. So there's that.
Thanks, Sarah. And then Melissa asked, how does recording sessions affect intimacy?
Yeah, do you record your sessions, Sarah, or?
I haven't been asked to in my current teaching, but I know we are being asked to for the fall. So I guess I have more questions than answers about that as well. It's just an assumed part of this accessibility accommodations requirement, but do we ask every single class? Do people have the option in activities to, de-identify themselves or pull back? Yeah, using tools that the student is automatically de-identified, like the word cloud, might, provide a barrier, like a tacit barrier to feeling exposed that way. But yeah, once you do that work and people are really grooving, like maybe they don't want to be recorded for posterity. It's true. Tricky.
Yeah, I'm not going to dance spontaneously if I know it's recorded. There's no way.
Very good point.
Good point. Let's see, Sarah, just a couple more and then we'll come back together as a group. One other question, do you have to have a paid membership to do the word cloud?
I forgot to say this, but yeah, this Mentimeter is a fee-based software, and I think the education price is about $15 a month. And they make you enroll for a year. So like I said, it's like $178. But one thing a colleague said that would be possible too, there are free word cloud sites in the world, and maybe I can drop some in the chat. If you have a class with a really savvy TA or helper, or maybe you assign a student helper and you did a polling in the chat, you could actually get someone in real time to create a word cloud by aggregating in the chat answers to a shared question and get that person to dump this into one of those sites. So there's kind of a workaround with the word cloud that I think could still work, but it might really require some rehearsal. And I think at least 4 hands, like 2 sets of people working on it at once. But that's definitely the con here, is that it's a paid site. And it's entirely in the cloud, and that makes me nervous. You can pull these out and make PDFs out of them, but content-wise, that kind of freaks me out a little bit about this site.
Thanks for sharing the pros and cons, Sarah. All right, any other questions? I'm going to now put it on gallery view so we can all see each other in these last 10 minutes. I'm just seeing if there's any questions.
I have a question.
Yes, David.
Elementary question. How did Sarah get that whiteboard to appear?
So does everybody probably know, well, on the bottom toolbar on Zoom, if you're looking at your screen, there's a green button that says share screen. when you
Yeah, I know that.
in the middle of it. If you're allowed to share screens, it gives you desktop 1, desktop 2, and there's actually a whiteboard option there.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I just never used it.
Yeah.
I sometimes in breakout rooms, I mean, everybody's saying you can share screens in breakout rooms, but don't you have to be the host to share screens?
I think you can allow the
Uh-huh.
lead administrator can allow everybody access to share. You can even edit it so one person can only share at a time, or you can allow simultaneous chaos sharing. But it's all in the settings. Yeah.
Yeah.
David, it's where it is if you click on participants, there's the microphone and the little camera picture. If you scroll over the camera picture, click on it, you can make somebody a co-host, and then they can share their screen.
Yeah, thank you. I probably need Zoom 101.
Next to the share screen button at the bottom, or wherever your toolbar is, you should see a little upward facing caret, or at least I think some of us can. If you click that, you can see who can share, and you can turn it from only host or co-host to all participants if you want to. And I think if you do that, then people in the breakouts, anyone in the breakouts could then share.
Yeah, okay, that sounds
Use
good.
it judiciously, because as soon as you do that, anyone can share at any time.
One thing I haven't been able to get an answer to is, like, in my classes in April, sometimes I'd post a URL for like a 4-minute video, and some students would say, well, the URL is not alive. And other times students, and then in the same class, some of the students said, yes, it is. You just click on it. So I never have been able to figure out why some people can, in the chat box I'm talking about. Does anybody know the answer to that question? So anyway.
Well, what I just noticed that the URL I had posted, a lot of times URLs these days don't include the HTTP in front of them, like just to make them look shorter and prettier. So if you copy it without an HTTP, it's not clickable. If you look in the chat right now, a minute ago I had posted a link to online office hours, and it's not clickable. The second one I made sure to include the HTTP, and now it's clickable. That doesn't change the fact that the same URL should function the same for everybody. I don't know what the answer is to that, but it doesn't become clickable, I don't think, unless you've got the HTTP.
Well, thank you. One last thing is, like, I love the question about recording, and I'm struggling with the question about video off. And just if others have ideas about, you have a class of say 16, and like 4 or 5 have their video off, like sort of ethical, just ways of inviting people, or should we just, okay, well, we're going to be here for 2 hours and they're going to have their video off. So any thoughts on that in terms of digital intimacy?
Go ahead, Susie.
So I've watched my 2 teenagers in class in their high school, and I want to just tell you that video off, I know I've read things from Duke that say, let students have their video off, blah, blah, blah. I personally think it's a horrible idea. And Rosie's school, which was very digitally savvy, came out the last 2 weeks and said that students weren't allowed to have their video off, because I've watched what happens when the video is off. When the video is off, they're on their phones, they're playing their games, they've got their, like, crazy stuff's happening when the video is off. So I'm not a proponent of it, because I'm watching teenagers that are, one of whom is 1 year younger than our students as freshmen.
I think, though, we also, if you have a long class, I think we all need a break. And like my it reminds me every hour to take 250 steps. And if someone's lecturing, why can't I be walking while someone's lecturing? I don't see a problem with that. And I think it can also be an equity issue if someone has really bad internet. If they sacrifice the video, sometimes it improves the sound or the connection. So
Makes sense.
I'm contemplating talking with them about establishing a policy that, you know, there are times when I really want them to have the video on, and I'm going to try to build in times where the video can be off if they choose. So I think having that break, I mean, like this morning, I went to get some coffee. I was still listening, but so that's what I'm contemplating in my particular case.
I know one of the things that people had mentioned in the spring, to us at least, is that depending on where the student is, there may be privacy issues of people. They might not be in a private location. They might be displaying family members or other things behind them with the video on, which isn't fair. You can use Zoom backgrounds if your computer is powerful enough to do that, but it can't in all cases. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's there's not one best answer, obviously. At DKU, for what it's worth, in the spring, you know, they went online a month before Duke did, or slightly more than that. And I think they ended up with a policy, sort of I don't know if it was officially mandated, but it was sort of like, unless you have a technical problem with your bandwidth, you need to have your video on so that we could see and you can engage, because people weren't engaging. They weren't chatting. They weren't audibly participating. You know, they had their screen off. It was black. You just didn't know if they were there. So it's really a challenge.
I want to say how much I enjoyed this. This was really helpful to me, and all the people that presented, Rebecca, Sarah, Melissa, and Amy, that was awesome. I know it takes time to prepare, and I really appreciate learning today. I'm going to use a lot of these ideas.